Hey guys, how's it going? Um, so I am here to do a tag. This tag was created by EarnestlyEston. Um, it's called the Reading Year in Review tag, and I have already done a sort of top books of 2017 video, but I thought that this had a lot of questions that maybe that sort of a video wouldn't answer, and I thought a lot of the questions were pretty interesting. So yeah, the first question is just to briefly summarize your reading year, and I kind of took down a few points that I think are significant about what I've read this year. The first is that I read a lot of dusty old classics. I read a lot of Shakespeare, as I haven't shut up about. I read Homer, I reread the Odyssey and read the Iliad for the first time. I read Milton, I read the Epic of Gilgamesh. So yeah, I've really loved that. I've really gotten into classics this year. In fact, I think the majority of what I read this year was some kind of classic. I also read like Samuel Beckett, and I read a little bit of Plato this year. So yeah, I read a lot of dusty old classics. And then the other significant development was I started to get into books by or about Native Americans. So I read like The Way to Rainy Mountain by N. Scott Momaday, about the mythology and way of life of the Kiowa people. I read some memoirs. I read Lakota Woman by Mary Crow Dog. I read a book by a white woman named The New Trail of Tears, which is about the current state of Native Americans in America. So yeah, I got really into reading about Native Americans, whether it was by Native Americans or by others. And I really want to continue that. But I also, another point I thought of was that I think I've really found my way with nonfiction this year. I read about a third nonfiction to fiction. I want to try to make that half and half. And what I mean by finding my way with nonfiction is that I feel like I have realized what kind of nonfiction I both get a lot out of, like in terms of learning and getting intellectual stimulation, and what I enjoy reading in the same way that I enjoy reading a novel. And unfortunately, the kind of nonfiction that I have finally decided that I just can't read, well actually I guess it's two, but it's sort of intertwined. One is history, which I know is breaking Steve Donahue's heart. And the second one's gonna break Steve's heart even more. It's biography. I don't know why, but there's just too much detail in those books. And I just end up getting bored. All of the detail just ruins the narrative for me. And, even on subjects that I should love, I tried to read the huge and very, critically acclaimed biography of Virginia Woolf by Hermione Lee, and that was a couple years ago that I tried to read it, and I was going to try and reread it this year, or reread it and finally finish it, but I just decided to give it away because I just thought, do I look forward in the slightest to reading that book? And I don't. Even though I'm fascinated with Virginia Woolf as a person, there's just far too much detail in that book for me to care enough about. So yeah, history and biography both have that problem, and it has sort of turned me away from both of them. I do have one history book that I'm going to try and read this year, and maybe if I like that one, I will see if more histories sit well with me. That particular history is by Adam Hochschild, who is sort of a journalist, so it's a popular history, so that may be the kind of history that I like. But yeah, that's the kind of nonfiction I don't like. The nonfiction that I'm finding I do like, for one thing, histories by these sort of older, dead, very dead historians, like the History of Alexander by Quintus Curtius Rufus, or the Histories of Herodotus, which I bought this year, and which it's over in the other room, but the Histories of Herodotus and the History of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, those kind of histories I really want to read more of, because I feel like they have they're not as detailed, I think, or at least based on what I have read of them, not as minutely detailed as a lot of modern histories, which, you might say is a weakness, but they're not as detailed, and I think they focus a lot more on the sort of narrative aspect of the storytelling in history. So I'm looking forward to reading more of those. I do have two. I have the histories of Herodotus, and I have the history of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides. So I will read both of those, and hopefully I will enjoy them as much as I think I'm going to. But contemporary histories and biographies, I'm just thinking, aren't my thing. The other sort of nonfiction that I think I really love is nonfiction kind of like Misbehaving by Richard Thaler. Kind of nonfiction that's not exactly narrative, I guess. Because there's like, I thought of this, I thought of The Power of the Powerless by Václav Havel, I thought of Night Falls Fast by K. Redfield Jamison. Because these books, none of them is about a person or a time period or an event. They're sort of about ideas. And I think that's the kind of nonfiction that I take toward. And so I think it's the kind of nonfiction that I'm going to try to focus on from now on. Because I love nonfiction. I sometimes actually think I might like nonfiction more than fiction, at times. Anyway, that is the nonfiction I'm going to be reading. The next point, I have one last point, is, of course, that I joined BookTube. And I think it's been really good for the way I read, because it kind of forces me to try at least to articulate something comprehensible about each book I read. Even if all I'm doing is, holding it up for One Friday Reads and just giving you a little spiel about it, I have to arrange some thought about the book and articulate it to people or to a camera. And I think that's been really good for me, and I really like that. So yeah, those are the main points I found about briefly summarizing my reading year. The second question is, what were the 3 most popular videos made in 2017? There was another question about just your 3 most popular videos overall, but EarnestlyEston said it didn't really apply when you joined in 2017. So my 3 most popular videos I checked. I'll leave links to each of them. The first is my introduction to ShakeTube, which I think has gotten almost 1,000 views, which is pretty crazy. And also almost makes me sad that that's one of my most viewed videos, because there's not really any content to that video. It's just me telling people about a read-along that's happening. But whatever. But my second most viewed video, I was surprised by this, was my review video of Crime and Punishment. Which was I'm thrilled about, because that review video was one of the first that I recorded, and one of the most challenging. I don't know what it was about Crime and Punishment, but I had a hard time talking about that novel in any comprehensible way. So that was like the 6th or 7th iteration of that video, the one that I posted. So I'm kind of thrilled that that has been so well received. And then the third was the slow read tag, which was a tag that I had seen Neil Griffiths do years back when he first posted it. I think I saw it. I'd been watching BookTube for quite a while, but no one it hadn't picked up any steam at all, and so I decided to do it and to tag some people to try to revive it, or well, I guess it's not really reviving if it never really had a life, but to try to give it a shot in the arm. And yeah, it bounced around for a couple weeks. I mean, Curtis Books and Films did it, Steve Donahue even did it, and I know others did it that I'm not thinking of. But yeah, so the slow read tag, for anyone who doesn't know, it's just a tag where you talk about a few books that you think should be read slowly, for whatever reason, because the prose is difficult, or because the prose is beautiful, or whatever. So, question number 3 is, what were 3 of your favorite tag videos of 2017? Well, of course there's the slow read tag, but I'm not counting that since I already mentioned it, but that would certainly count. But 3 others that I loved, oh wait, no, I do have the slow read tag as one of my favorites. So yeah, there's a slow read tag, I mentioned it, it is one of these. The second one was the A to Z Bookish Survey tag, which I just saw Curtis Books and Films do, and thought it was a really neat tag. It just, has a question for each letter of the alphabet. Probably a lot of you have seen it. And it was just fun coming up with answers to each question. I had to do a lot of preparation for that video, but I ended up loving, I really enjoyed it. And then the Commonplace Book tag, which was a wonderful tag that the Medieval Reader created. I thought it was a great idea. And and I had a lot of fun going through my my woefully not updated commonplace book and giving some of my favorite quotes. So I'll leave links to all these videos. And then question number 4 is 3 of your favorite works of fiction from 2017. This question seems a bit redundant since I've already done my top books of 2017 video, but I figure whatever. The first that I want to mention is How It Is by Samuel Beckett. A very weird experimental novel. Let me try, I'm going to show you a little bit of the way it's written, so I hope you can see that. So there are there's no punctuation, there's no real even sentence structure, and these paragraphs aren't really paragraphs, they're just kind of each disconnected thoughts. So yeah, it was an interesting novel to read, but I thought it was beautiful. And it actually made me emotional, which I wasn't expecting in a novel like this. So yeah, How It Is. And the next is, this is going to be pretentious, but The Iliad of Homer. I didn't read it in this translation, this is just the copy I have. I actually read it originally in the Richmond Lattimore translation and enjoyed the story, clearly, but found the translation to be a bit dry and boring. And I've read snippets of the Robert Fitzgerald translation and thought it was beautiful, so I'm hoping to reread this in the not too distant future. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year, although I might reread it this year, I'm not sure. But yeah, just so many moments from this that have stuck with me, and such a beautiful story, and so much to say about just war and how we deal with affliction and calamity in our lives. So yeah, anyway, it's a classic for a reason, so yeah. And then lastly, I thought I would mention, in my favorite books video, I mentioned just Shakespeare in general, but I thought I would individually single out Hamlet, because I did kind of go through a brief obsession with Hamlet. I actually dressed up as Hamlet for Halloween this past year, and for a few weeks my friends could not get me to shut up about Hamlet. I was so into it, and so yeah, I thought that it would be appropriate to just include Hamlet on its own here, even though it's technically it's you know, a play, not exactly a work of fiction, but I mean, it's a made up story, you know. So yeah, question number 5, 3 favorite works of non-fiction. So Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human. I expressed my disagreements with Harold Bloom. I disagreed with him on several points. Well, more than several, many points, including his main thesis of this book. But his passion for Shakespeare really comes through in this book, I do think. And you know, it was hard for that not to be infectious, and I think it's the reason that I got so into Shakespeare, just hearing how much he loved Shakespeare, and how much he got out of Shakespeare, even if I don't get the same things out of Shakespeare in the end. So yeah, I think I have to include this, and because it's just my first book I've ever read on Shakespeare. So yeah. Next is one I read close to the end of the year, which I enjoyed so much, Mythology by Edith Hamilton. So she, you know, attempts to do a big narrative overview of sort of all the Greek myths that we have, and draws on many, many sources, and I just admire how she draws on so many disparate sources. You know, she draws on Ovid, the Roman poet, she draws on, of course, Homer and Hesiod, she draws on the playwrights, Euripides, and, you know, it would be easy to think of this book as just kind of spark notes for the Iliad and the Odyssey and other things, but it really isn't. It really is a literary work in its own right, I think. She writes so beautifully about all these myths, and, in fact, I was quite moved by her, description of the Trojan War. So yeah, I highly recommend this, to anyone, so, yeah. And then lastly, I have to mention it again, The New Trail of Tears by Naomi Schaefer Riley. I've mentioned it several times about the current state of Native Americans in the United States, which again, is quite horrible. So yeah. And then question number 6 is favorite comment of 2017. So after a few weeks after Shakespeare ended, or ShakeTube ended, I read Measure for Measure in just on my own, and so the video I posted ended up having an interesting thumbnail. I'll leave a link to the video. Thumbnail had a picture of me when I was holding up my fingers kind of like this, and I was kind of looking off into the distance like this, and Steve Donahue commented, "The thumbnail looks like a 10th century saint icon." To which I responded, "Did I never mention that I'm 1,000 years old and that I performed 2 miracles? One of which was to resurrect a cat, and one of which was to find money in the stomach of a cat?" No, just kidding. Anyway, I just got a kick out of that. And then number 7 is reading. Do you have any reading regrets? And I think my main reading regret is that I didn't finish reading all of Shakespeare. That was a goal of mine eventually, and I got within 4 plays and just could not go on. It was too much of one author in too short a span, so I'm gonna sprinkle those last 4 plays throughout this year. Yeah, that would be my biggest reading regret. And then number 8, what is a reading goal for 2018? And my goal is to read what I know I'll enjoy. And enjoyment, in terms of what I get enjoyment out of, I do get enjoyment out of difficult books, so that doesn't mean I want to read easy books. Just what I found sometimes is that I choose books to read based on what I feel obligated to read, because I'm very interested in sort of being well read and reading, sort of the books of the Western canon, which is why Steve's sort of Western canon starter kit was a godsend to me, because it was so much more manageable than what I thought mastering the Western canon was. But I think I need to just let myself read what I know I will end up really enjoying. And that will definitely end up including a lot of classics. I'm not saying that I'm not going to stop reading classics. It's just that I need to pick them based on whether I'll enjoy them, rather than an obligation to read them, I find myself right now really wanting to read Dante's Divine Comedy at some point. But not because I feel obligated to, but because I'm actually interested in the content of the Divine Comedy. Charles Dickens, on the other hand, I'm not that interested in reading Charles Dickens, to be honest. I read Great Expectations in high school, and I'm still recovering from it. I did not enjoy Great Expectations. So, I just want to read what I know I'll enjoy. So, yeah. So that is the 2017 reading year in review tag. I hope anyone who's watching this and wants to do this will do it. I know these videos are starting to go out of fashion since we're getting into the new year already, but I decided to do it. But anyone who is interested, please do it. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.